I absolutely adore this moment from K-pop Demon Hunters. I had such a big smile on my face when I watched it for the first time. K-pop stars usually have this flashy veneer of polished perfection. They're always poised, put together, perfectly dolled up and everything. And for most of the film, these girls are exactly that. But in this scene, you get to see them just being girls. They're snacking, lounging in bathrobes on the couch. They contain multitudes. They're not just these perfectly poised K-pop stars all the time. They're just normal girls. The scene adds so much authenticity to the film. Despite being demon hunters in a fantasy musical action film, they still feel like real women. I wasn't involved with K-pop Demon Hunters specifically, but I am a storyboard artist working in animation. I want to talk about 3 steps that artists can take to make their work feel more real, more authentic, and less flat. It goes way beyond drawing skills. If you're a beginner artist and you feel like your work is missing something, but you're not able to put a finger on it quite yet, hopefully the mindset shifts that I'm going to discuss in this video will help you break through that barrier and improve. The first tip I have is that you don't actually need to know how to draw everything. Drawing from memory or drawing from imagination is not the end goal. Your art will improve in leaps and bounds once you realize this. Using reference often and effectively is your end goal. A lot of beginner artists I work with think of their art as this sort of linear progression. You study for a few years, maybe you go to art school, and eventually you hit this professional status. You're freelancing, you have a lot of clients, or you're working at a studio or whatever, and you think that you're supposed to have it all figured out. But that's not really how it works. The learning doesn't actually ever stop. And I don't mean that in some sort of inspirational way. I mean that literally every single professional project that you work on is going to have some sort of learning curve associated with it. You will be looking up reference all of the time on the job. Reference is not just for beginners. Everyone uses reference regardless of how much experience they have. A quick little story time. When I was working on King of the Hill, I could not draw hands correctly to save my life. The show has a very realistic and grounded animation style. If Hank is holding a beer, he has to hold it just right. It can't just look like a claw. It has to be a normal hand holding a beer correctly. Because of the way animation schedules are, I don't necessarily have a lot of time to do studies or to just practice. So I would just take photos of my hands multiple times a day and just copy that hand pose onto whatever I was working on. By the end of the year, I had probably over 100 weird hand photos on my work laptop. I'm not sure if I deleted them either. I've had coworkers stage scenes in the hallway and then get another person on their team to take videos of them doing something, just so they have an accurate reference. Most of you would probably use something like your camera roll or Pinterest or something else to collect reference, and that's fine. However, I have a much more effective and optimized tool to offer you when it comes to collecting reference, and that is the sponsor of today's video, Milanote. Milanote has been such a huge help in organizing visual research and ideas for a secret project that I'm working on. As an artist with ADHD, it's hard for me to keep track of my ideas and even harder to follow through on them. Milanote is the perfect tool for visual creatives to dump everything in one spot. It's like Pinterest, Google Docs, and Miro all in one app, but made specifically for creatives in mind. You can build boards, build subboards, drop in images, screenshots, notes, videos, color palettes, basically everything you need for visual development or creative planning. If you're working on a webcomic, pitch bible, short film, game concept, or even just studying fundamentals, Milanote gives you one central cohesive place to keep everything organized. And if you're not really sure where to begin and all of this seems overwhelming for you, Milanote offers over 100 built-in templates that you can use for any type of creative work. For me, the biggest benefit of Milanote is the fact that with all of its different features, you have one single dumping ground for everything. You can even doodle directly on Milanote itself. For my secret project, I've even written all of my outline ideas and scripts and notes directly in Milanote so that I'm not jumping between Google Docs, my Notes app, and Pinterest all at the same time. One of my favorite features is the unsorted column. It's a little holding space on the side of every board where you can toss ideas, links, images, anything that you want to have in your board, but you're not quite sure where to put it just yet. This feature alone keeps keeps me from falling into that ADHD freeze mode where I don't want to do a specific task because there's multiple steps involved and I'm just overwhelmed by it. Milanote is free to use with no time limit, so if you want to give it a try, hit the link in the description box to sign up for a free account. Thank you to Milanote for sponsoring this video. I know I've mentioned ADHD a lot, so quick plug, my ADHD coaching program for artists currently has a few spots available. Link below. Someone left a comment on my last video complaining about how I was just redrawing random photos the whole time, and I cannot emphasize to you enough just how often I use reference on the job, how often I've been encouraged to use reference by directors and pretty much everyone I've ever worked with, and the number of times I tell my students to find reference of something because their drawings just look off in some way. Being able to draw something from imagination is good, and muscle memory definitely makes you faster, but it also keeps you stuck in what you know. Using reference has nothing to do with how much experience you have, and it doesn't mean you're a bad artist in any way. We have our phones on us all the time nowadays. Most of our computers have webcams, so it doesn't actually take that much time out of your day to take a photo of something and use that to augment your art in some way. Reference also isn't just for things that are difficult to draw on a technical level. You can also use reference as kind of inspiration for what you're going for visually or stylistically with your project. If you look at my Milanote board, you'll see that I don't just collect drawing reference necessarily. I also save images that inspire me, like old anime that I grew up with, or just illustrations that have a really interesting vibe. I'll have notes on character archetypes, anything that helps me brainstorm. And that leads me to my next point, which is observational study is not ever supposed to stop. When I say observational study, a lot of people think that I mean academic exercises like figure drawings, still lifes, master studies, environment studies, what have you. Just like when it comes to using reference, a lot of artists think that eventually they graduate from doing any sort of observational study, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. A lot of artists get stuck in this phase where they just don't ever stop to observe real life beyond a certain point. If you want to make your work feel authentic, you need to be studying real life, real people, moments and behaviors. That's where actual inspiration and authenticity comes from. They'll do what they're told, they'll do all of their figure drawings and still life exercises and whatnot, and they think that's where the observation starts. They think of observation and art as two different things. But then you run into problems like every single one of their poses coming off as stiff or unnatural, or their characters just not being believable and them not knowing exactly what needs to be done. As a teacher, if a student comes to me for feedback, I can't really redraw every single pose in a 100 panel storyboard sequence. That would, number one, take forever, and it would also stop them from thinking critically about their own work and why it looks off. It's the classic, like give a man a fish versus teach a man how to fish situation. So usually in that scenario, I just tell them to start observing real life again, and not just like fundamentals, but the people around you. What does someone's body language look like if they're anxious or angry? How does someone actually sit on a couch if they're exhausted? If you're a painter, what does golden hour actually look like? And not the Pinterest version, like the real one, like go outside, touch grass, take photos. In storyboarding, it is glaringly obvious when someone is able to observe and draw from life as opposed to from their head. The difference is night and day. I haven't seen Elio yet, but a really common critique that I've heard recently is that the writing of Elio's character seems to be from the perspective of an adult who thinks they know what children act like as opposed to what children actually act like. Observing from life, and not just in an academic sense, but soaking up everything that you see around you is actually really crucial. Sometimes, even with all of that, the thing getting in the way of your work isn't really observation or technique or using reference. Sometimes it's just capacity. You gotta start observing yourself at some point too. And that leads me to my next point, which might sound like fake inspiration or glaringly obvious, but bear with me because this comes up a lot in my life. Your health is supposed to come before your art. Your art is always going to be built on a foundation of mental, physical, and emotional health. If you're struggling in any of those areas, you're just not gonna make good art. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And I'm sorry if that sounds really harsh, but I see it time and time again with a lot of students that I work with. You're not gonna make good art if your ADHD is not managed and you can't focus. That's just not gonna happen. If you're burned out or overwhelmed, it's gonna show in your work. A lot of people think that they're failing at art in some way, when in truth, they're just depleted. They're frustrated by their own performance, they can't focus, and they're struggling struggling to improve, but what they don't get is that it's not a matter of learning or personal failure in any way. It's a health thing, your mental, physical, and emotional health. Your brain can't be creative when it's trying to survive. I've had to tell many people to just take a break from art altogether for weeks or months and spend all of your time looking for a reliable doctor, getting their sleep schedule in order, taking some time to themselves, building that absolutely necessary foundation of mental and physical health. That pretty much sums up my video. Take care of yourself, notice the world around you, don't be scared to take photos of your hands if you don't know how to draw them, and then do the work. If this video was helpful for you, I highly recommend joining my Discord server where I do personalized one-on-one mentorship. Right, I'll see you next time. Bye!